completely short-staffed, with rising hourly wages, and everybody kind of complaining about America for lack of leadership. So it was a very lot to take in, but I thought I'd just start with that. It's a slightly open-ended question, but I think a very loaded one maybe, but do you agree that the world order is completely changing? Are we looking at something which is completely we haven't seen before?
That's a fascinating note on which we can begin this interaction. But forgive me, you said nice things, the lady who was introducing me. I'm surprised you didn't mention that you were having a conversation with one of your columnists. So, I was a diplomat for 39 years. I traveled around the world. But I think I think in 2013, just when I retired, the then editor of the Indian Express, including the gentleman now, I mean, of course now I'm part of the system again, but when I was a private citizen, I remember writing a fairly large number of columns. But
you're very welcome to write now as well.
I do occasionally. But when you take a column from a minister, the Express, with its rich tradition of distancing itself from the government, relegates the column below. I got better profile when I was a private citizen, but that's neither here nor there. No, I think your question is very, very deep and profound. Another way of addressing this issue is, are we witnessing a process which is already well embarked on deglobalization? Because if you say that Portugal is preoccupied with X, some other country, the United Kingdom, a country with which we've had a 190-year-long association, is witnessing the steepest decline in living standards. Now, I'm choosing your words because I'm a minister, I have to be careful. You said the United States is not providing leadership. That's what you said, somebody said. But have a look at what's happening inside the United States. The inflation rate in the United States today is the highest in 46 years. The Fed has just announced a steep increase in the interest rates.
75 basis points is unprecedented in America.
Absolutely, and the markets, in fact, had already factored in that increase in interest rates, and the talk now is of a similar increase in the coming months. So that is the United States. The Prime Minister very graciously sent me to Davos, and we can have a long conversation of what I saw, but the most important thing I found there is that Europe seemed to be preoccupied with itself. It took some gentle but assertive interaction to tell them that there is a world outside which today is beginning to face challenges. We have a number of crises, there's no doubt about that. And we should not approach any one crisis in a manner that it ends up exacerbating the other crisis. What do I have in mind? The food crisis, the fuel crisis, and the fertilizer crisis. In effect, they're all three interlinked. Why has that happened? Your question is a very profound one. I've been a student of the global situation or interactive. I was a member of the Foreign Service for 39 years. That's a fairly long period of time. I've worked after that in international think tanks. I've now been part of the government for nearly 5 years. I would be hesitant to make an assertive assessment. What I would do instead is to say that the global order which was established post the Second World War, starting with the San Francisco Treaty, which set up the world order, the United Nations, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, the Bretton Woods Institution. I think the time has come to see if the tweaking that is required in that system to make it fit for the world, and the world has changed rapidly. You can see that change in the composition of the permanent members of the Security Council. You can see the change in those who are doing the heavy lifting. I mean, 2020 March, the world locked down, which means economic activity came to a stop. And since you were talking about air travel, I was civil aviation minister. And the learning experience that I had there, it's one thing to run an airline out of which 45 to 50% of the cost of operations comes from aviation turbine fuel. But another lesson I learned, which I will never forget, that it takes a lot of money even to maintain a fleet when it's not flying. But where were we? We were in March 20, we were closed down. My greatest level of satisfaction is that when it came to civil aviation, which is one of the portfolios I was dealing with then, and it came to choices between life and livelihood, we opened up at the right time. Our vaccine story is a huge thing, which was resounding in Davos. I mean, I was checking, I was in a smaller interactive session today like this, 1.94 billion vaccine doses. I mean, I was talking to the Singapore foreign minister, yeah. And no matter which part you look at, how much of your adult population is today vaccinated? A relevant question. What is the efficacy of the vaccines that you have administered? You just have to compare it with what's going around in the world. So it's been a difficult period, but one out of which we have navigated with a great degree of confidence, maturity. Not that there haven't been challenges. I mean, nobody will deny that. But where are we today? Again, if fuel prices are at $120 a barrel, you don't need to be an economist to know that fuel prices at $120 a barrel makes global economic activity unsustainable to the, right, with these kinds of other actions we are talking about. You're not looking at recession with a capital R, you're looking at even more serious things in the short term.
And so that's, I think, where, I mean, you mentioned three crises. I think a lot of it stems from the war, and obviously that creates this inflation problem, which is leading to this whole conversation. But specifically, because it's oil, everything comes down to oil. I mean, I know it's a little debated how much oil is a factor to the inflation versus other things that have also happened in the last couple of years. But that dependency on oil, how long do you realistically assume this is going to keep continuing? I mean, I know we can't change it in 6 months, 1 year, but how long do you see this dependency on oil sort of just continuing? Forget anywhere else but for India.
Permit me to submit a difference of nuance. I don't think the problem started on 24th February when the military operations between Russia, Russian Federation and Ukraine. No. The fuel problem predates that. I recall visiting the UAE to attend a meeting of ADNOC, which brings together all the energy leaders from all over the world. And I recall that and I was a newly appointed petroleum minister. Major preoccupation was that there's no shortage of energy in the world. There's no shortage of oil. If you tell those who are responsible for putting that oil in the market, I mean OPEC plus, and you say that, if oil continues to rise like this, so standard answer, perhaps the correct one, is that we don't determine the price of oil. We just determine how much quantity we put out. So which an undergraduate student like me has a response, but if you put less than the demand, then you ensure that the price goes up. So my first submission to you is, the crisis was on us well before 24th February. But 24th February provided it an altogether new dimension. What is that dimension? You already have Venezuela under restriction, under sanctions. You already have Iran under sanctions. Iran has about 35, 40 million barrels of oil ready on a platform which can go out any time. And you have Russia now. It's not under sanction, but there are Russian entities, etc. So let me break it down into a small, I keep coming back to an undergraduate level equation because it's nothing more than that. Russia produces 7 or 8 or 9 million barrels of oil in a day. Let's say a decision by one large consuming group is enforced totally, which means 7 million barrels of Russian oil will stop coming into the market, which means that someone else should be able to produce and enhance their production. I know. Recently, figures were put out that 648,000 barrels of additionality would be put out. The market next day, price went up. Normally, a price should come down because because the market is cynical about it. So I make the submission to you. 3 things have happened as a result of this crisis. And whilst there will be turbulence whilst we navigate the crisis, but some good things will come out of it. One is people have become extremely cautious because you don't want the kind of impact on your consuming public which we are seeing in some countries around India. So you want to make sure you have oil. So you will diversify your sources. Number 2, all this talk about green energy transition, it will take place much faster. If you look at what we have done in India, we've dramatically enhanced our exploration and production, dramatically. Out of our 3.5 million square kilometers of sediment basin, whatever the technical term is, we were never exploiting more than 7 to 8%. We ramped it up to 15%. Our biofuels blending, which I remember as ambassador to Brazil, I used to push a lot, in 2014 was 1.4%. Today, Anand, we are already blending 10%. We had a target of 20% for 2030. We've already brought that forward to 24, 25. E20 or ethanol 20% blended will be available on our petrol pumps according to my ministry statement by 1st April 23. But I can tell you here, taking advantage of this setting, it may be well before that. We are going for compressed biogas in a huge way. I looked at the figures which you require for that and we ramped it up. So all I'm saying is, yes, it is difficult. There are challenges to be faced. But you know, when you have challenges of this kind, you either convert them into opportunities or you get slightly weighed down. I think we are not only navigating. There was a lot of criticism a few days ago that some of our entities were importing crude and not selling on the domestic market. I think that's been corrected also. And I think public opinion in that is a major, and that's what I welcome this interaction. But equally, I think what needs to be done is that the perspective has to be understood. Like I got a letter from a political party. It says, why is this not happened, that not happened? I mean, a simple one-line answer should have been, wake up, man, find out what's happening in the world. No, but I will not. I will be polite. I will tell them what the ground reality is, etc. and why. And my favorite calculation sheet, I've got it here. My young colleagues who helped me in my work told me, isko zarur batana, कि कितना % US में पेट्रोल बढ़ा है, कितना % यूरोप में बढ़ा और इंडिया में कितना कम % बढ़ा. So I told him, I said, that's a good talking point amongst educated people. But at the end of the day, when you go to people, Anand, do you have any idea how many people go to a petrol bunk every day? Guess, roughly.
In India?
Huh?
In India?
In India.
That's a big
6
number.
crore, 60 million people. When I say that to my colleagues who are the energy ministers in other countries, I mean, when you say 60 million go every day, you do realize, yeah. But I'll give you another figure which will help put our position in perspective. No matter which way you look at the energy equation, India will be the critical driver of demand in the next 30 years. Yes. Why? You have a population which is economically more active. Our per capita consumption is 1/3 of the global average. Global averages will remain same. You can't consume. A rich Europe cannot consume more energy. They may have to source it from somewhere else if Russia doesn't, earlier it was we'll cut off Russian supplies. Now the reality is that Russia may decide to, choke off something. I have a feeling that whilst all the positive things are happening, etc., the international arrangements which are in place, that was your question, I want to answer that. They are going to fundamentally change. I mean, if insurance covers are not going to be available out of London, then insurance covers, nobody is going to sit still. They will become available from other parts of the world. If people think that they can artificially calibrate the amount of supply, well, you might suddenly discover that people have gone right ahead and you might, when the transition takes place, be left with more than you had bargained for.
So, before I get to the next question, Vaidhi, if I can just make a request, everybody can just take a second and just turn their phones off. I'm hearing lots of noises from the side, so if you can just, let's all pause for 1 second. Please reach out to your phone and just put them on silent. I'll be very grateful. Thank you. So I'm coming back to the question I started with, and I'll try to, if I can get a specific answer on exactly this. Is there a shift in power, shift in leadership, or is there many small pockets of deconcentrated?
Look, it's very tempting to say that there is a shift in where power resides. I don't buy that. The United States is the lead economy. It's about $20 trillion. Yeah. You can't change that. The Chinese are the second largest economy. I don't know where the GDP is and current exchange rates, etc., measured in dollar terms, $12 trillion, $12 trillion. After that, the next lot are people, 1 or 2 countries at 5, and there are countries like India, which are today, I think, 3.23 trillion. That was the figure I last looked at, but very fast coming up to $5 trillion. So what will the world look like in 2030? Because 2030, when the UN finishes its Agenda 2030 or the Sustainable Development Goals, if our projections are right and India becomes a $5 trillion economy, there's no issue. Whether it's in 24, 25 or 28, it doesn't matter. I mean, you never bargained for 2 years of COVID, but still we are now our petrol consumption, all the other indicators, way beyond the pre-COVID levels. In 2030, Anand, we should be a $10 trillion economy. Now, by that time, presumably the United States and China and all the others would also have adjusted. But you can look at trajectories. Some will go up, some will not be able to go up, so for a large number of reasons. The real issue is, will the second largest economy challenge the world's largest economy in terms of economic power? Rest, there is no question. I mean, the political military thing is very much there. I don't know as yet. And my professional training for 4 decades holds me back in terms of making rash this thing. So I don't think that political or economic clout is there. Some countries will come up. Over the years, when I was dealing with issues relating to Security Council reform, and we used to say which particular country in a particular continent is likely to vie or put itself up as an eligible candidate for Security Council permanent membership. It depends on when you're talking. At a particular time, South Africa, Nigeria, sometimes somebody, equal in Asia. But India is on a steady path in terms of getting there.
And maintaining this number 1, number 2, is that in India's interest that number 1 remains number 1, number 2 remains number 2?
No, it's whether it's in your interest or not. I think there's precious little you can do about it. I mean, if you look at the solid economic fundamentals, the lead that the United States has in terms of technology, innovation, etc., it's a very established thing, and the world will approximate. So you need excellent relations there, you need to manage your relations elsewhere. But I think the India story is the steady one.
Yeah. Mr. Puri, one of the very most interesting pieces of India's, say, foreign relations I'm talking about foreign relations also because of you were a diplomat and also you are the petroleum minister now, specifically with respect to West Asia. Pre-2014 and post-2014, that seems to be a very perceptible change in our approach towards relations with West Asian countries. The Saudi, the UAE. Of course, oil is a major component. Like we are one of the biggest importers of oil. How do you see the change in dynamics and what has necessitated it probably, if you can throw some light?
First of all, I think these are very strong relationships. And oil may appear to be a more important factor looming on the horizon now because the oil prices are very high. Yeah. But please also look at the numbers of the Indian origin or Indian passport holders who are working in these countries. Put aside Saudi Arabia or the UAE, there are countries where the largest component is Indian, guest workers or however we choose to describe them. So it's a very strong relationship. It's a relationship which does not classify or lend itself to simplistic assessments. Now, if India can supply them food, India will supply them food. Equally, what is the level of interdependence? Then there are factors of geography and proximity, etc. So these are very strong relationships. And I think the years of the Modi government, 2014 onwards, have witnessed special efforts made by both sides in terms of how the strength of the relationship is fortified by excellent personal level chemistry between the heads of state and government. And I think that's a defining feature. A number of occasions that the Honorable Prime Minister has gone there, or we have had an occasion to welcome. Now, that partly reflects also the India resonance, as I call it. It's not just that part of it. You look at ASEAN. We had the ASEAN foreign ministers here. I had an hour-long meeting with the Singapore foreign minister today. But that also, in a way, reflects the kind of position India finds itself. And I don't go by, assertions such as India is important. No, it's the contribution that India can make. If you're a responsible member of the international community, over the years you were a troop provider in terms of UN peacekeeping. Today you are, many years ago, much before our government came in, we became the pharmacy of the world when, intellectual property questions were on the forefront. We became suppliers of generic and bulk drugs to parts of the world. Today you're supplying vaccines. And at a time when other countries' vaccines, which are very prominent countries, their efficacy is not holding up. So India has a contribution to make, and I think the India contribution is both in terms of tangible assistance you can provide. Look at food. Where have you traveled? You traveled from a food importing country psychology, which was, part of that PL, 480 scenario, to now where it's not that you stopped exporting wheat, as my senior colleague, Mr. Goyal, keeps saying. It's not that. It's just that you don't want a situation where the exports that you are putting out then get channeled into people who start putting them in silos and holding. Now,
since you mentioned that Turkey specifically,
well,
was that political? Was that real?
Well, I personally don't know, and I wouldn't even.
When you mentioned it, I thought I'd bring it up.
No. I'll tell you something. There are people, narrative creation becomes a casualty sometimes. The fact of the matter is, in spite of the less than expected wheat crop, we still export. And we export, which is a big thing. You look around the world, how many countries actually can produce food for export these days? Especially with fertilizer prices what they are. And what are we doing? If the bag costs 3,000 rupees or 3,500, you're making it available to your people for 300. Now, you don't want that kind of assistance which you provide to your producer to be, exported. So you have to be a little careful on that also.
So I interpret your trend of thought. So you were talking about the Middle East specifically.
Middle East itself, I think, is in a very fascinating phase most of the oil producers that I know of with whom I've spoken are very keen on the transition, shift to sustainable energy, green hydrogen, etc. The only point I keep making, and maybe because I'm a newly appointed energy minister or petroleum minister, is that look, if to have a successful transition, it means you have to transit from where you are today to where you are. If in the process of that transition, you come across hurdles which are insurmountable, then the transition is never going to take place. Then what you will have is uncertainty and turmoil. So I think the world understands each other. I'm hoping that the developments in the next few months, people will realize that it's in everybody's interest to make sure that oil prices are not at the current levels, and that if they are, who defines reasonableness? You and I will think, what, $50 is reasonable, 60, they may say, no, no, there's not, investment has taken place. But I think the market has a way of working it out. And once the market determines where you are, I think the rest follows.
You mentioned oil exploration, and we have suddenly, I mean, for a long time, India has not done as much as it could have for oil exploration in India. Would you ever invite assistance or invite investment from Middle East and other countries to come?
We've already done it. We've already done it.
So today, how much of oil are we importing?
85%.
And that's gone up tremendously.
No, but it's because your consumption is shooting up.
Yes.
Your my petrol consumption last month, over the previous month was 14% higher, 15% higher. Because I shouldn't be saying this, but it seems high prices don't make an impact other than on the politicians who want to hurl bricks at me, you know. I mean, the consumer at the pump is not, there's 6 crore people, 60 million people who go to the pump every day. And which is the highest selling car in India? I'm not going to name it because I'll be accused of promotion. But it's a car which costs 18 lakhs of rupees. So I think you have to shift the political from the economic. Give credit where I think some is due, that in spite of all the challenges, we reduced excise duty on 4th November and 21st May. I wish other states had done it. But the government at the center is ready to, walk the talk.
Yeah.
Mr. Puri, let me take you to an interesting period in your tenure in between 2009-13. You were the permanent representative at the UN. And around 2011, I think there was this, in the UN, huge issues about Syria, Yemen, the Arab Springs, which kind of broke out there. And India was also the member of the UN Security Council then. So exactly 10 years later, India is still, again, a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council, and you are dealing with things like, the Russia-Ukraine war. So in this period of 10 years, how do you see, I was going through your book, actually, The Delusional Interventions, which is a racy account.
Where is this interventions? The Security Council, yeah.
So, how do you see India, do you see parallels between how India has dealt with this tightrope walking then and now?
First of all, and I say this with great sense of satisfaction, our votes on Security Council resolution, I think it was 1373 on Libya, our vote on the Council resolution on Syria, and which was 10 years ago, 2011, I think. Actually, it's under India's presidency of the Security Council.
Right.
I was presiding over the horseshoe. Yeah. Why was it correct? Let me share some anecdotes with you. The British permanent representative is a very dear friend of mine. He has a name which he has a city in Pakistan named after his family, so you'll get guess there. I told him, I said, Mark, have you thought this through? It's in my book, so I'm not revealing any secrets. Have you thought this through? And he turns around and says, oh yes, absolutely, X, whoever was the ruler, there's a very bad man, and he has done this, he's against human rights, and he has done that. I said, very good. Which means you've thought it through, which means you will take the consequences of what you're doing. What are the consequences we are talking about? The use of force from the outside to reorder a society from the inside. That is use of force. And my book is on that. It's very interesting. When I wrote my book, Perilous Interventions, a lot of people told me, you've spent 3-4 decades in the international system. With this kind of book, will you have any friends left? So I said, I don't care. I've just described what happened in the Security Council. The chaps were gung-ho, wanting to do X, Y, Z, use military force, good at. I'm a professional diplomat and I have a long memory. Some of those guys don't talk to me about those things today. But the real issue is, there was a split in the permanent members of the Security Council. What happened at that point of time? You had a situation where the United States, Britain and France wanted Security Council authorization for the use of force. What is the value? Look, somebody can't get up one day and say, we must attack a country X. You need Security Council authorization for that. But there were 2 countries, permanent members, who decided they were not going to agree. So what was India's vote? India abstained. But do you realize something? Among the countries which abstained then, Germany. If you look at the German vote on the Libya crisis, Germany abstained. It was a shock. And who supported the resolution from the developing countries? South Africa. I took the South African ambassador, who was a very dear friend of mine. I took him around, and people wouldn't let us talk because they thought India, South Africa, Nigeria was on the council. They were going to huddle up and cook up some kind of a deal. So I said, let's go to the men's room. So nobody will follow us there, including the press. I said, what are you doing? He said, I have a problem. I said, what is your problem? He said, I'm getting instructions to support the resolution. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So I asked him, Kahani kya hai, batao? You know what he told me? I think it's in my book also. He said that somebody has, the president was Zuma, I think, at that. Yeah, you know what the president, that those who drafted the resolution and said, we are bringing the resolution, this will then be an issue which will be mediated by the African Union. So that African Union mediation lollipop they went in for. I met the ambassador of Nigeria coming out, and I was watching her face. And she was also a very good friend of mine. I asked her, sister, what is happening? She said, I have an instruction that I have to do exactly what South Africa does. So you had a peculiar situation. A resolution for use of force in the Security Council comes up. Countries abstaining are India and Germany. Countries supporting the resolution for the use of force, South Africa and Nigeria. Of course, you know what happened. The rest is history. I mean, the Africans all went on to rue the day. And the ones who brought the resolution, this is the real story. So I said, have you thought it through? Susan Rice was the US ambassador at that point of time. And Mark Lyle Grant, he went on to become head of MI6. You know, those who brought the resolution and those who used force felt that they were liberating a country through the use of force. You know what happened? That American ambassador who went there, they thought there was a mob outside. They thought the mob was cheering them. The mob came and did what it did. So, you know, my book on perilous interventions has a chapter. I see Tavleen sitting there. She and I go back and talking about our own perilous intervention, you know where? In Sri Lanka. And of course, I have a chapter on Crimea also. But then I wrote it as a professional diplomat. So, let's be very, very careful. One of the blurbs I have, or maybe it's a review, I don't know, but probably a blurb, that the use of force is invariably accompanied by unintended consequences. And the unintended are also unforeseen. You think you're going to go in somewhere and use force and it's going to paddle in your name. It doesn't work like that.
But do you think, I mean, I know this question has been asked in all kinds of forms, all kinds of people, but I would love to know your view. How successful, or rather how unsuccessful, and why do you think the UN has been so unsuccessful in preventing use of force? It's a long question, I know, but I would still...
No, first of all, I mean, I see my friend here feeling sorry for me and having a good laugh. For what is the UN?
What is the UN?
What is it? There are 3 UNs out there. Okay? One is the member states, which means the 193 member states of the UN, which is you, me, and all the other countries. Then there is the UN Secretariat, right? Secretary General and the third is the third UN, which sometimes I used to think when I was in New York was more powerful than the 1 and 2, which was NGOs, civil society, and you guys. You know, mold opinion, you're the great influencers. If the UN is a mess, don't blame the UN, blame the member states.
No, but are you assume? I mean, would you agree that it's been unsuccessful and it is a mess? Of course.
Now we go to something which has to be empirically verified. So I would answer that question very clinically. In the crises that we have seen in our lifetimes, how effective was the UN? If you were to ask the question today in the political situations or military situation, has the UN been particular? I don't even think the UN would even claim it. The Secretary General, Mr. Guterres, who's an old friend of mine, he was High Commissioner for, by the way, I was permanent representative to Geneva also. He was High Commissioner for refugees, I think, when I was PR in Geneva. He wouldn't claim it. When he went there, the big member states didn't support him. So, UN can be effective provided the member states are also making it effective. Now, if I were, not me, but Lakshmi interacting with you, she would have given you a far more sophisticated answer on how effective or non-effective the UN is. But I want to be a little careful, all right? Now, in normal times, if the permanent members agree amongst themselves, they can all get together and tell the Secretariat what to do. But if the Russians and Chinese are on the one side, or if the British and French are not seeing eye to eye, and each one of them is gung-ho and using the veto, just look up the record of the UN. Whenever crises have taken place, how many times has the veto been used? And what are the purposes on which the veto has been used? So today some countries can turn around and say, which they said in my time also, that if you are facing a situation which involves one of the, what you call the mass crimes, you know, genocide, ethnic cleansing, war crimes, and crimes against humanity, a permanent member should not use this veto. But look, this is all talk. Let's look at what's happening in terms of fact. So, if I were to want to wriggle out of this question that you put to me, I would say, yes, I think the UN could be more effective.
And maybe if we do another question in foreign, and we come back to India, at some point we should come back to India. But, no, so, you know, with the whole question of renewables and, you know, is there, again, I'm saying shift of power, but, you know, we are so dependent on Middle East, Russia, oil-producing nations right now, but assuming renewable happens the way that we are all expecting it to happen, we're hoping it will happen, will there again be a shift to China and South America, because that's where the lithium is, that's where the, you know, the things that are needed for solar to work is. You know, renewables also, will we become again dependent on, you know, will it just shift dependency?
No, I think you are doing a quantum jump. You are doing a quantum jump both in terms of the energy and also in terms of uses. Let's take them one at a time. Let's take biofuels. We have gone today, as I mentioned, from 1.4% to 10% already demonstrated. 10% at last year's prices, which were not that high, meant 40,000 crore of saving. But it also meant that we were able to put that money into the pockets of our farmers because biofuels, etc. Now, I'm going to do a demonstration next week. For instance, Ujjwala is a great success. Everybody, you know, Anand, we had 14 crore gas connections in 2014. Today, my figures which they gave me were 30 crore gas connections. And during the pandemic, you gave 3 cylinders free. But we are now, I'm going to do a demonstration next week, and if you are here, I'd like to invite you to we are now going to the solar cooker. So, when technology takes over, in terms of vehicles, I think it's a chicken and egg story. When I ask people, how many to know, I saw a statement by the head of one of the India's large, very respected economic entity, who was saying, what will be the number of electric vehicles on the roads in 2030? I can tell you my OMCs, who are the oil marketing companies, they have decided in principle that every conventional petrol bunk will have an electric charging station. So somebody told me, but why do how will you use so many charging stations? So I said, this is the chicken and egg story. If there are charging stations, the car manufacturer will come in. I got a delegation in from Brazil, because in Brazil you have flexi-fuel. Flexi-fuel means you can go to a bunk at the point of time, and depending on the price of ethanol or the price of petrol, you can decide how much. You are going in that direction. Once you have 20% blended fuel available on your retail outlets, once you have electric this thing, I have a member who's a MLA in Delhi, who's an old collaborator of mine from my university days. He was telling me, I run an electric car and the cost of running is so and so. No, but then the debate comes in, we're going to have a lot of electric cars. Just get ready for that. That's happening, and there'll be charging stations, there'll all be that. But you could still argue that the grid is not totally green. Yeah. The grid may not be green.
It's but coal energy is what you're storing and transporting.
So what we are doing is, you're going into green hydrogen in a very big way. We're going into CBD in a big way. So you're doing a large number of things with a degree of simultaneity.
So energy, we're not going to be dependent on
nothing,
not anyone as we are. It's not about who, but not on anyone.
It cannot be, because your experience has taught you. See, one of the things that the pandemic did was it made you wary of your supply chains. When the disruption took place, you said, hey, wait a minute. I cannot be dependent on getting my active pharmaceutical ingredients only from one source. I need to diversify. We had a vaccine manufacturing capacity in the public sector, and I think the previous government between 2004 and 14 dismantled it because it was not a priority. Today, I think the lessons that we've learned have driven home the point, and I think my generation and your generation, you are much younger, but we can never forget the fact that you cannot be dependent on either one source or one type of energy. It can, create severe consequences. So you will have this multiple forward movements on fronts.
Yeah. So in terms of hydrogen, I think, that's the government is also working on mission mode in that. In your assessment, in terms of, say, costs and viability, operational viability, how do you see the progress so far? Because even worldwide, I think it is still at many places in pilot stages, and there are quite a few challenges in that.
Well, I think the challenges are there anywhere, but the optimism that I have on green hydrogen is of a very high order. I'll tell you why. I was talking to the US Secretary for Energy very soon after I'd got appointed, joined. It was a partly courtesy, partly get to know each other kind of call. And when it came to green hydrogen, she said 1-1-1. Now I tried to understand that. That is 1 kilo for $1 for 1 decade, 10 years. Something like that. Please correct me, whoever is part of my research team. Correct, right? Okay. See, I said, how can this be? But then I decided to go into the details on what it requires, what is required, what is the ask for you to be able to produce green hydrogen. It's a very simple answer: cost of power and an electrolyzer. Okay, now, let us say for some reason, my domestic situation does not permit me to bring the cost of power down to that level. But this is where the Indian jugaad and innovation comes in. I'll give you an example. I had some youngsters, I'm very impressed, by the way, when I see these startups and what they come up with. I'm not going into the figures. How many unicorns are we producing in the year? 43. Next year we are expected to produce 56. You know what a unicorn is? There were years we didn't produce one. Yeah. You look at the global thing. So one of these youngsters came to me and he said, I want to set up a turbine. I said, what is your power? He said, 50 megawatts. So I asked him a simple question. Can you put 10 of them together and to make 500 megawatts? He said, no problem. So I got the chairman of one of my big oil companies, it's a Fortune 500 company. I said, how many refineries do you have? He said, 11. So if you study, you know which one has 11. He said, 2 I put in this. I said, try this in one of them. He said, I will. So you see, if you are an electrolyzer manufacturer, I hope there are some European colleagues sitting there, but they will get to read it. I asked a very simple question. If you are talking about energy for the next 30, 40 years, which country would you bet on? If I were not an Indian and if I am not holding the job, I'd still bet on India. For the simple reason, energy is something you produce in a place and you're best off consuming in that place. What is my debate with ethanol? Everybody suddenly wants an ethanol plant. Everybody. Okay? I keep telling them that we have done an assessment based on your likely consumption of ethanol. Okay? Now, if you want to make more ethanol in a state, let's say hypothetically Bihar, and you're not able to consume it, why should I be spending diesel and expending diesel to take it from Bihar to, let's say, Tamil Nadu? India is the place for energy in future because the Indian growth story will require energy. And if you can produce it here, I have absolutely no doubt that, you know, the Prime Minister was speaking to the country from the ramparts of the Red Fort, 15th August. He said, we'll do it in mission mode. It is being done. But like in most things, we have a strong layer of cynicism, you know. Arey, petrol, diesel, ye kya? Some people actually ask me, aapke companies ne rate kyun nahi badhaya? So I said, you know, I'm shocked. You would ask me agar humne badhaya ho aur unhone badhaya. I said, if somebody is a good corporate citizen and is deciding to absorb some of that thing because he thinks the customer can't take it beyond a point, they will keep testing. Testing, I saw ATF going up by, 15% or something? Yeah. So, will it have an impact? How much will it be passed on? Will there be such a? We are grappling with those things.
And specifically on coal, you know, at one point we used to export.
You know, I'm going to say something that might startle you, but I think I need to say it. Whenever I look at our energy situation, including coal, I just have a feeling that somewhere along the line, many years ago, somebody gamed the system, so we would become dependent on imports. So you had the resource, it was there, but you didn't use it. When did you start using, and I'm not going into specific, when international prices went sky high and you had no option but to go ahead. So no, I think coal is going to be around. We'll have to still deal with fossil fuels, etc. Because as a country, you know, I don't want to make a statement and my colleague, the environment minister, gets upset with me, but I have a more practical approach to utilizing all sources of energy.
No, but will we ever, would you like India to be a place where we'll be exporting coal again? We used to do it like, I think, 11, 12 years ago.
I am talking about uses on exports, on all those things. I said those are decisions which you need to take. When you know, if you, I mean, there are commodities and there are commodities. Some commodities.
We are holding back our own coal
that's
now.
the point I'm making. Yeah. I'm on your side on that. I think you need to use it. Otherwise, your power situation will be in a problem.
Okay.
Mr. Puri, just, you know, it's probably something which I would, as a observer of Indian economics, would never advocate, like, you know, the ban on wheat exports that we have done. But the government has done exports of wheat.
Of wheat?
Yeah.
No, yeah.
You know, what has happened since then is also that, you know, from Russia, India has imported crude, and fortunately our refineries have the capacity to, you know, refine this sour crude. But, you know, in this process, private companies have also imported a lot of Russian crude. Whereas the OMCs, state-owned OMCs, sell the refined crude all in India, private refiners do make windfall profits by refining and exporting crude. So no parallels to be drawn, but, you know, you have a situation where, you know, some exports of wheat is banned, but in another sector you allow unhindered exports of refined crude. So is there
it's a very several loaded things there. But but I agree with you.
I thought I'll just draw you.
No, but I mean, if I were you, I'd be asking the same question. So I'm not. I have no right to complain. First of all, our refining capacity. I think currently we're at 252 million metric tons per annum. We're going to take it up over a period of time to 400 million metric tons per annum, which is going to be perhaps one of the largest refining capacities in the world. Are we buying from country X or Y? Sure. We're going to buy from anywhere. I mean, if it's a choice between having my retail outlets go dry and my sourcing, we will buy. If any of you have spare oil, please let me know. I have got some colleagues. We'll put you in touch with our company. Of course, we're going to buy. There's no issue.
Yeah.
Now, how does the market react? The market consists in India of public sector entities, which are called oil marketing companies. Some of them are Fortune 500, they're very big. And you have private retailers. I'm not going to go into names. Now, some of the private retailers, according to reports I had 2, 3, 4 days ago, saying some pumps were going dry. Why were the pumps going dry? Because perhaps the private retailers, thinking that if there was more money to be made exporting, decided to reduce the quantum of sales domestically. But I think we've dealt with that situation. I haven't got the report, but I was assured yesterday, no, absolutely they have an obligation and they will sell. Am I entitled to ask them to sell? Absolutely. Absolutely. If I'm providing, if India provides a field for them to this thing, so we rejoice in the fact that they do well. But there comes a tipping point if you have to choose between a little domestic obligation also, and I have no doubt, I think they will rise to that. Wheat ban export. I keep telling, I think there is a narrative issue. It's not that we are saying that we are going to hang on to the wheat and it's just going to remain here. No. What we've done is, in the kind of situation we find ourselves in today, it is probably judicious, and I'm not speaking on behalf of the Commerce Minister, to utilize your ability to export food to certain countries as a strategic means. If you open it up totally, you know what's going to happen? It will not go to the people who need it. It will go to people who have the capacity to buy, and wheat doesn't have a limited shelf life, so it will be stored in silos, and then what can happen is that the global price can shoot up and people will turn around and start selling in a speculative. It's possible, I don't know. So I think what we've done on all these fronts, I'm not taking credit, it's commerce or food and civil supply, they've done absolutely the correct thing. And if you were to ask me a question which you haven't asked me, would I do it again? Absolutely, I'd do it again. Today, a democratically elected government is responsible and answerable to its people, not to some theory. I mean, by the way, I spent many years at the WTO's predecessor called the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade and the World Trade Organization. And I want to congratulate my colleague, Mr. Goyal, for pulling it off now and getting a declaration after about 10 years or so. But free trade is a nice thing to talk about, and we should do that. But we also have a responsibility to our developing countries, to other people in need. When we had the exports, when we had the capacity for vaccine, whom did we export to? We exported to countries which did not have a vaccine manufacturing capacity and countries which reached out to us, and we will do it again.
So I think I'll ask one question more, coming back to India, we open to the audience. And I want to get you to your other ministry, which is Urban Development and Housing. You know, one of the things that we keep hearing and we keep seeing when housing prices rise a lot, right? You have a bit of a problem in government. On the one hand, do you encourage that? Because a lot of, an Indian household savings, disproportionate from anywhere else in the world, is the value of the house. On the other hand, your cities start pricing out innovation. People can't afford Mumbai, they can't afford Delhi, and they start living in the outskirts. So somewhere, I want your view on this idea of, do you encourage residential prices, real estate prices to rise the way they are? Should they, or would you rather they kind of be stagnant? Do you?
I'm going to answer that question very clinically. I see some prominent builders sitting here also. So, first point is that it's not the government's job to either encourage or discourage. It's not the government's job. Anand, government has to make sure that it has a system in place which works. And the most glaring thing I found when I've been housing minister, I think for 5 years now. I think in September of 2017, nearly 5 years. We did not have a regulator. In and of itself, that was a position bordering on I don't want to use too strong a word, it's scandalous that a sector like construction, housing is part of that, which along with agriculture and perhaps textiles, these are the three largest sectors in terms of employment generation, in terms of contribution to the GDP, and I can go on, they're important. You didn't have a regulator. So what happened in that situation? I hope none of you will mind my saying what I'm going to say. What happened is, most home buyers are like me, they don't read the fine print. They go by market reputation. Somebody comes and says, "A bahut badhiya project, we're starting a brilliant project." So he said, "Yeah." By the way, we are one of the few countries in the world where people start taking money from people because they're building a project. So it's possible. So the man takes your money and decides 30% of the way through that he would rather invest in a land bank. So he starts buying land. He says, "Very good, I'll complete the project 3 months later or 3-5 years later." And he ends up buying land bank. But the only problem is, if everybody starts buying land, then the land value also, you have more money chasing the same thing, so land prices drop. Suddenly the builder who had a successful model goes broke. So what did we do in RERA? I think it's good to understand this. First of all, when I became a minister, I was told, it's too little, too late. I could write a book. There was an attempt to sabotage RERA both from the inside also. There were people who turned around and said, "No, it's too little, we need a stronger legislation." So my lawyer friends will, I don't know where the motivation, some builders would have said, "Yaar, isko derail karo." So a large number of cases were filed against RERA. So the Delhi High Court or the Apex Court directed all the cases to be taken up in the Mumbai High Court. And I had just become a minister and I started looking at these attentions, these issues. I have a youngster who was part of that RERA drafting committee. And the best thing is, the court threw it out. RERA is here. RERA is a roaring success. It has helped people in most places. It's also a dispute resolution forum. Now there are some issues which are outside RERA. For instance, RERA means that if you start a project, 70% of the proceeds you take have to go into an escrow account, Anand, which can be only used for that project, which is a very good thing. So the first time, things are doing. But projects have got delayed, especially in the people around Delhi. If you talk to a builder, he'll probably give you a very sensible explanation कि आपने वो land नहीं दिया, आपने ये नहीं किया, वो नहीं. But it's all being cleaned out now. I would like to come to a situation. So, am I happy when land prices go up? Well, I'm first of all happy that the inventories are gone. I used to tell builders, "Bhai, itni inventory lag ke kya karoge? You've taken the loans. Many of them have gone bust. They also have problems because they have borrowed. So you have to look at their problem also." So I told him, "Kya karoge?" I said, "Why don't you reduce the price a little?" No, a lot of people prefer to not reduce the price and keep high inventory. But I think all that is a thing of the past. In some cities, Mumbai, for instance, prices have gone up. Delhi, if you take out these 2-3 big projects which are problematic in the national capital region, big names, etc., they're because people went to the, NCLT, they went to the Supreme Court directed operational. I think real estate is doing very well. Is that something for which the government can take the credit? I don't think so. But the government can take the credit, rightly, for bringing in a regulator, for making sure that the kind of practices or malpractices, etc., are now a thing of the past. And most important, today when you go and buy a property, most likely he will want all of it in a check or this thing.
Yeah.
Now, some of it is coming back, you can argue with me. Yeah. But government is not the, only agency which needs to reform. If people become willing partners to that.
Sure.
Mr. Puri, on housing, as Anand said, people invest almost their entire savings in housing, and as a housing minister and Indian citizen, you realize how much house means to everybody. But then in certain states, we see that, bulldozers are out there. And the most peculiar aspect about this bulldozer phenomena is also that the criminality is somehow linked to illegal construction, and not illegal construction per se. And there is a process. So I just wanted to, take a minute before answering this, that when a house is destroyed or bulldozed or razed, it is like, 20 years of savings down the drain.
No, I think I can have an easy way out. As a land is a state subject, and as a minister, I have nothing to do with it, as a central minister. But I'm not going to take that. Mr. Iyer, I'm going to give you a very simple answer. Don't try and judge what happens in a particular case and which occupies a lot of high voltage space in a newspaper or a news channel as the problem. If the issue that we are discussing here is unauthorized colonies or unauthorized construction, then you're talking to the right guy. Because what we did was, this has been pending from the year of the law 2005 or 6 when you had a Congress government in Delhi. Urbanization in India is an autonomous and robust process. People come from their villages in large states, come to tier 2, tier 3 cities looking for jobs, then they migrate. Any Indian can settle anywhere. So a lot of people came into the national capital region of Delhi or Delhi itself and started, some unscrupulous elements started cutting, wo kehte hain colony kaat rahe hain. Literally it means that they just on paper, they said ye zameen hai. Nobody went into the title, nobody had this thing, you needed a roof on your head. So they just went and constructed some structure there. And what happened with that structure? With the passage of time, the powers of persuasion which comes in a democratic process, you organize yourself, pani bhi aa gaya, bijli bhi aa gaya, but they were unauthorized colony. So we are very happy. I piloted that bill on regularization of how many was it? 731. 1731 colony. I'll never forget that day because my daughter was getting married. And one of the religious ceremonies I had to skip because I had parliament to go there. It's one of the success stories. We were able to take something, we had a cutoff point, it's still work in progress because we had 2 years of COVID which came in. So, insofar as the, sensational, are you allowed to throw a stone, are you allowed to damage public property, that's not a discussion which can be easily had without knowing the context of that thing. And what is the remedy to that? What I did was, I knew, you might ask that question. So I came prepared. The matter came before the Honorable Apex Court, I think yesterday was it? Yeah. And the court said, follow due process. And what due process in effect means is, they didn't state. They've given them time, let us know. If it is unauthorized, is that the way? So they will answer that. But that's not something the central minister starts. Land is very much a state subject. But I would, in the interest of the kind of discussion we are having, no matter what the issue is, the right to dissent is fundamental. Have it. But express your dissent in the form of disagreement, not by saying, if you don't give me this, I'll burn this down. That cannot be the...
I think we'll get some audience questions. Yes, please. Tavleen, can we start with?
I want to take you back to your diplomatic role. I mean, your comment I want is on the Ukraine war, two related questions. How do you think it's going to end? And where does it leave India, since Russia could end up as a junior partner of China, who's our biggest enemy?
How will this end?
The war end. How will the war end?
No. How will the war end? I have a personal view, which I will refrain from giving here. But I would give you what I think is an eminently sensible view, which is the Indian official view, which is please place a premium on diplomacy in order to resolve it. Please try and achieve in the short run a cessation of hostilities so that you can sit down and use your margin of persuasion. Will X become a junior partner of Y? Tavleen, I honestly don't know, and I've been around in this game, what, I would now, it's almost saying, what, 45, 46 years? I don't think anybody is becoming anybody's listening partner. It's convenient for us at different points of time to use those as thing. I think we are very well positioned today in terms of realizing that our interests lie in a course of action which is make sure that you are in a position to talk to all the parties, deal with all of them. If some of them have, postures which are not to your liking, you'll have to deal with them. But there are also historical facts. I mean, some people have been more helpful to you than others, but we are equally confident of being able to deal with all of them. So how is it going to end? I have a theory. My theory is that it will not take as long as people think it's going to take. I think some things will fall in place. As I said, this discussion better not had here, because what has happened in all this is a dominant narrative which has been created, including on our TV screens. Now, if you make the mistake of taking your cue from what the TV screens are saying, like so much else, then you must also, like a good student of history, be able to decide, ye history likh kaun raha hai? Where are the biases coming in? I mean, I've always maintained the choice of words one uses indicate which side of the thing you stand on. So I think an end could be in sight, but it's not for me to speculate on that. I was one of those who kept saying, he's been saying for 15 years, if the NATO line moves in here, he was going to do it. I was in a minority of, I shouldn't say very few. People said it would never happen. It happened. Today you have to look at the reality of what is going on there. And I think they will find, I mean, there are costs to be paid, but the international community has to, shoulder this thing. And it's not going to come from taking irrational sides one way or the other. It has to come from a genuine belief that you need a cessation of hostilities.
But is there, I mean, maybe I'm again reaching here, but I wonder, isn't it India the right person to negotiate this?
That's a lot of people have told me that. When I was in Hungary for the Operation Ganga, the Prime Minister told us that he was going to depute four of his, 4 or 5, I think, 4 of his colleagues to members of the cabinet, to Council of Ministers, to different countries. I went there, and anyone I met said, look, India is absolutely the one country which both sides to this thing would listen to. They've said it subsequently. At some point of time, somebody has to, bell the cat, but you also have to make sure what is the opportune time. But look, this is not a question you should be asking me. You'd call Mr. Jaishankar here and have a similar session with him and ask him that question. Whatever I've said in my personal capacity and without any, insights into that, because I'm more busy with Central Vista and oil prices.
Sure. Mr. Naveen Raheja? Yes, please.
Last 45 years I have been working in India as a developer. For the first time, last few years, from the day you took over, I think I'm looking at it as a time of transformation, and too fast transformation, and too positive transformation.
आहिस्ता कर दें थोड़ा.
नहीं, I am just giving two things. If we can, in this transformation, if we can take other ministries also, like railways, forest, other ministries where there is a redevelopment is required, and if all the ministries join hands, we will be able to see a new India. Because as we see at the, when you travel through Shatabdi or through train, you find a lot of open defecation and all. And a lot of these things, I think, concern the ministry as well. So if I can also contribute and join in that for a joint working with all the ministries to see that the India changes, and this transformation is actually that aspect is also covered. That is number one. Number two, the transformation means transformation everywhere. We see how fast the things are changing. You look at the Delhi old buildings, how they are getting into the new form. You see clearances online. 45 years, it used to take 3 years, 4 years to get clearance. Now it is online available. So a lot of things are happening. So why not do these one thing? And number two, we are finding little difficulty in coordination when it goes to the forest, environment and forest clearances.
Actually he's trying to be nice to me. What he's trying to say is कि आप बड़ी तेजी से काम करो, बाकियों को भी कराओ. बैठिए, अब मैं बताता हूँ आपको. पहले, the first fundamental thing is we are constructing, again, please correct me, but 700 to 900 million square meters of space every year. We are constructing. Now that is equivalent to one Chicago. Every year we construct. So काम तो हो रहा है, दबा के हो रहा है. So when somebody turns around and says कि employment नहीं हो रही है, so I said, यार, just put on your glasses if you've got an eyesight problem. Do you know for every प्रधानमंत्री आवास योजना हमारा क्या टारगेट था? 1 करोड़ का था. We've already sanctioned 1 crore 22 lakhs. For every 1,000 units of affordable housing and partnership that we construct, we consume so much steel, so much cement, and so many people get employment. This is all, it's not I've got another builder sitting and tell you. It's a fact. You are generating that employment, but you want to change the narrative, people go the other. ओपन डेफिकेशन पे जो आपने कहा है, ये आपकी बात सही है. पुराने जमाने में रेलवे ट्रैक एंड इट्स immediate both sides were great places for defecation. But I think the Swachh Bharat mission has done one thing, which I can tell you. Today, except one state, and don't make me name it, but most of you know, India is open defecation free, not by my certification, by third party certification. Railways में क्या कितना काम हो रहा है, बाकी this government works as whole of government approach. So I'll tell you, I have projects which involve a very active contribution to be made by the railways, since you are giving that example. Where I'm getting that contribution, number one. Not all of it may be visible and not all of it may be available in the public domain. Entirely possible. But I can tell you, environmental clearances pe aa gaya. Bhai, I still think none of our big projects or small projects are held up because of clearances either on building permissions you mentioned are online. In fact, most of the cities, is it under Amrut also, no? Where if the response doesn't come by a particular date, you presume that you've got the clearance. So it's the onus is on the other party to make sure, if they want to withhold something. So I'm not happy with that also. Kabhi kya hota hai, they're not in a position to give clearance straight away. Koi frivolous question laga ke wapas bhej dete hain. So we are dealing with that. But when you introduce technology, look at the transformation which is taking place. There was a time when technology was not available. So when this whole computerized online stuff started, one of the things I was very happy to find कि अब तो सब ऑनलाइन हो रहा है. कह रहे सर प्रॉब्लम है, ओटीपी नहीं मिल रहा. मैंने वो क्या होता है यार? कहते वन टाइम पासवर्ड. So we sorted that out. देखो, challenges will come because you are dealing with human beings. Different people respond to challenges differently. Some of them take it head on and convert it into an opportunity. But I want to assure you, what you are saying is happening, and the kind of interministerial coordination and the small groups that the Prime Minister formed, the health sector is a case in point. I was a member of the GOM during the pandemic, and I saw how it was functioning. Absolutely new. I mean, you just sat down, looked at the issue, took the decisions, it worked. We had many briefings. You had to involve the ICMR, you had to involve the doctors. And the airlines had this problem. Some of the pilots took us to court saying that, oh, beach wali seat khali rakho. You know what, I turned around and said, मैंने कहा वैसे ही viable नहीं है चलानी, अगर beach वाली seat भी खाली रख दो, तो why do you want to make the effort of flying it? We went to the court. But everything is something you're learning experience. But I think what you're saying is correct, but it is happening. That's my answer.
The next question from Nalini Singh, but before that, I'll just ask Mr. V.N. Dalmia is on Zoom. So, Mr. Dalmia, will come to you right after this question, please. So please keep your mic on and be ready. Please, Nalini, go ahead.
Thank you. Already Anand and Mr. Iyer have said that an Indian household, an Indian family pours all its money, 75% of whatever it has, into a house or land or, some prospects for the future. Now, you have mentioned how the builders are gaming the buyers or have gamed the buyers.
It once before RERA,
Once
not now.
before RERA, so they did it. Now let me tell you how government is gaming people who have property. And lots of people have said that I should ask you this. When somebody wants to sell their property, maybe it's a piece of land, maybe it's a little building, maybe it's their house, they do it because they need the money. Now, they find a buyer and they tell the buyer, you have to pay the stamp duty at the circle rate.
At the circle rate.
Fine. The buyer says fine, this guy says fine. Now this person might be selling their property because they need the money. It might be a distress sale, might be something. Now they are saying that you pay the stamp duty at the circle rate, but they negotiate with, we will take this much money,
Totally
about
correct.
70%. But Hardeepji, let me tell you that I have seen this, that the regulator says, aha, the difference between the 70% and the 100% stamp duty is the black money that you have taken. Please, sir, let me finish. And not only are you to give us both buyer and the seller, you must each give us the 30% of the black money that you have, mythical black money that you have taken, and pay interest and penalty on this black money that you have taken. Sir, let me tell you, you mentioned just now that now it's all in check. And after demonetization, your government has claimed that black money has more or less gone from the system. Even if it has not gone, I'm saying there are some of us who haven't seen 10 rupees in black money. But we pay capital gains tax of 21% and we pay, let's say, 30% in black money that we have not taken. What kind of gaming is this?
First of all, let me say, even at the risk of shocking you, I entirely agree with you. I agree with you. You're not only my neighbor, but I think I empathize with the problem you're saying because I'm also at the receiving end of this problem. First of all, who sets circle rates? The state government. So what have I done? No, I have not sat back. I told Mr. Kejriwal, by the way, there was a time Mr. Kejriwal and I used to talk regularly. In fairness, if I remember correctly, he said ki till a particular date 20% wo kam kar denge. Okay? But my colleagues in my ministry who are sitting here will bear witness. I have been talking to all state governments. I've been saying, you are actually penalizing yourself if you don't have realistic circle rates. Now, why was this circle rate created? High ones. Because you had a situation earlier where, a property which was worth 400 crores, I mean, I'm going hypothetically, was sold for a song. So people turned around. So one mistake doesn't, I agree with you. So what have we done? What have we done? What I'm going to do, I'll tell you. I have been pressing this point for rationalization of circle rates for a long time. I have even asked for us to examine whether, because why? What's happening? There's no regulator in this. You are referring to a department which collects the revenue from the sale. If you sell below the thing, they'll say, so I also said another thing, Acha yaar, you go ahead and carry out the transaction. How many such properties will any agency acquire and do what with it? Because at the end of the day, the market determines what the value of a flat is. All right, some people bought those flats very low and they went up very high, but then there were question of, another floor, FIR is not being used. So I'm familiar with that. What I want to assure you is that I am fully conscious of what the problem is. Maybe this is not an area, a forum where I can, because we'll need a half an hour, I'll tell you, the responses also have been very different. For instance, in Maharashtra, not now, but earlier when we had the previous government, if I remember correctly, they rationalized the FAR also. Which some of you will probably remind me, they made it 3 for One
FSI,
and
yeah. We called FSI Maharashtra.
FSI.
Maharashtra.
Yeah, exactly. And it took off. So I cite that, I mean, you are the right person to ask, yeah. Not FAR, but FSI, yeah, Floor Space Index. There we are trying to do it in a number of things. We are trying to encourage the urban local bodies to raise finances, because what happens, they don't charge revenue where they have to, so there's neglect. So I keep saying, follow Swachhta, follow all the other things, and let us go for a rationalization. But it's a very high priority as far as I'm concerned, because I see if people sell and buy properties correctly, not through, what is it called, power of attorney. Power of attorney में तो किसी को पता ही नहीं लगेगा. So the state is depriving itself of revenue. So I'm entirely with you on what you're saying.
More questions, please? Yes, please. And then, can we take two questions at the same time?
Yeah,
Yeah? Let's take two at the same time, please. We first follow this and the second after that. I can ask, because in the interest of time, if I can ask keep questions a little bit short, please.
Hardeep ji, you have always been very articulate and very candid. So, I am representing Rajiv Gandhi Institute of Petroleum Technology. We were hosting Professor Ram Charan just a couple of weeks back, and he said that recession is on the cards. Number two, Anand said that there is a changing world order. And during this time, are we taking advantage of this changing world order in trying to position India at the correct place? And I'm going to actually qualify this, what I'm trying to say. See, what is happening today is that there are a lot of opportunities which are getting created because of the supply chains getting disrupted and changing and so on and so forth. But my understanding is that we need to be looking at exchange rates, etc., to favor us to be able to, sit in this changing world order at the right place. Are we actually utilizing those opportunities enough? Because he had, by the way, a couple of weeks back predicted that Fed will go up to 5%, there is global recession, etc. Another question that I have within this is that in this global recession, will India fare better than the others, and why? Because that's a question that actually I am also trying to sort of grapple with. Is it the richer which will survive better, or is it the poorer, which is, the third world and developing countries, which will survive better? And why?
I'll give you a very short answer because of the lateness of the time. The answer to your first question is yes. And the second question, will we fare better? The answer is also most certainly. And I'm going to cite to you something that I read this morning, put out by our central bank, the Reserve Bank, which was we may be able to avoid the stagflation which the others may not be. It's a report I read today only. There are many reasons for that. One is that, by and large, the challenges that we face. Look, some of the inflation is imported. You know why. I don't want to enter into a tutorial class here, but I have my theories on this. During the pandemic, how many trillions of dollars of stimulus packages are put? $20 trillion? Total of. Now, $20 trillion is put in there. That is the amount of extra money which is there, which is chasing goods and services. Obviously, there's going to be inflation. Bring on top of that extra high price of oil, there's going to be a problem. Why will we fare better? I could give you a list of answers, but the answer is yes. I think we are today, as we have shown during the pandemic and our handling of the COVID crisis, etc., we are better positioned. I'm not a soothsayer. I don't know whether what will be the degree of impact and what will happen. Some of those things that cannot be forecast, because you are talking about exchange rate. We don't determine the exchange rate. I mean, the market determines the exchange rate. But we are doing a lot of things, and frankly, it's a question that the finance, yeah, absolutely correct. Absolutely, absolutely. But there is a reality out there. If the lead economy in the world rates its interest rate more, and you are a successful businessman, you will decide where you want to park your dollars, whether you park them here or there. You're getting a better interest rate. You're not going to be guided by my. But we have the far-sightedness, you choose my words carefully, the finance minister and the people who are dealing with that ecosystem, to anticipate and to be able to position ourselves in such a way that we lessen the impact of the global challenges and come out of it more resilient.
Mr. Dalmia, you can turn your camera on and please ask your question. Mr. Dalmia on Zoom.
Okay. Mr. Puri, I want to ask you about the extensive and significant shale deposits that used to be spoken of in the 2000s, which it was said had the potential to transform our petroleum economy. Were they not exploited for technical reasons or economic reasons or environmental reasons, or what happened to them?
By shale, you mean shale in the United States. That is where the...
Shale in India.
No, Arunachal Pradesh.
Yeah, okay. So see what happened to shale globally, I can tell you, once the price of petrol went down, people were not they didn't feel the compulsion to go down the shale route. But what I can tell you is, if the price is high, obviously we will go at shale, and we are looking at shale, and work is happening there. But the real shale story was in the United States, where, literally hundreds of billions of dollars was going there. But once the price of oil came down, people didn't have the incentive, because there was also the fracking and the environmental issue. But the real story is the price will determine what your compulsion is.
At that time, they said $70 was the place it
Yeah,
came in by.
exactly.
We'll take another question from the audience, please. If I can just see the hands up. Yes, please, please.
Mr. Minister, since you mentioned...
It's on. Go ahead. We can hear you.
Mr. Minister,
Please
you
keep it short if you
mentioned
can, please.
Central Vista project, and since you're overseeing it, you've lived all over the world, traveled all over the world. I would like to understand from you, has there been another instance, what I would call it as demolition of history? And were the funds which are being pumped into it justified during the 2 years of the lockdown?
Okay,
I think, let me answer the question. First of all, Madam, I would like you to get a perspective on it. The current seat of government was never designed or intended to be the seat of governance of an independent country. This entire architecture goes back to 1916, and it was supposed to be the imperial legislature, etc., not the capital of a country. Second issue is that we are building for the next 250 years. And I don't want to be too aggressive with you, but I would invite you someday to come and sit in my office, which is in Shastri Bhavan. My own office, thanks to wherever I am, I make it a pleasant place to sit in. But if you can navigate your way in and out, you will look at what the Indian population was in 1916 when this was conceived, and the fact what the population of Parliament is going to be when the delimitation period ends, when 2026, etc. So I'm afraid yours is a non-question, and a lot of motivated people tried to throw mud, and I've got all the statistics which I'll share with you later. Peed ukhad jayenge, ye ho jayega Central Vista Avenue mein. And we have, in another few days, it will be open to the public, and I took your editor, including Mr. Rajkamal Jha. I told Bimal to take everybody other. When they went and said, I also went there. I said, why don't you ask me a question कि सारे पेड़ उखड़ गए, कहाँ है पेड़ उखड़े हुए? तो वहाँ है, total number of trees which were retransplanted is what, 40? And that entire project, I know you gave me a list today. So I'm afraid on Central Vista, we were a punching bag till the misinformation was out. Now all I tell somebody is waste of this thing. I mean, we kept the project going, and what is the cost that we are talking about? Do you know how much it cost? The Parliament building ka kitna budget kitna tha wo? 800-900 crore. And even with the steel prices passed through, and you want to tie yourself to, and where is the history gone? The history is there. None of these iconic buildings which are historical, cultural buildings is going to be taken down. So it's a lot of BS with a capital B and a capital S, which certain sections of the so-called liberal friends to whom I used to belong, who've been spewing this venom at us. It's total nonsense. This is one of the best things that's happened, and it's going to be our pride for the next 250 years.
Yes, please. Please, short question, I'll get into.
Just a very brief question. I am A.K. Jain from the urban sector. You have talked just now about the colonial baggage, which I think is appreciated that you have given up this colonial baggage. Another thing which we observe about you is that you are very impatient. You are always in a hurry and doing so many things.
I'm a good foot soldier.
Okay.
The boss is impatient, so all of us foot soldiers are impatient.
Yeah. So my question is that in your time, 2 master plans have been prepared, one for NCR, one for Delhi. And these master plans, again, are in the colonial baggage for 20 years, and our cities are on ventilator. So why not for 5 years?
देखिए ऐसा है, मास्टर प्लान किसी भी, कोई भी मास्टर प्लान हो, इट्स नॉट मेड फॉर 5 years. मास्टर प्लान, पिछले जो मास्टर प्लान बने थे, इफ आई रिमेंबर करेक्टली, वो क्या 2006 they started the work and it ended up in when? In नहीं, हाँ, मैं क्या कह रहा हूँ, वही, it took more years to prepare the plan than, to execute it. Today, the only difference is a widespread stakeholder consultation, widespread. It's not a master plan which I'm producing or, my friends sitting here are producing. We said, here it is, let's have stakeholder consultation. Today there's an election going in some part of Delhi. They called me and said, can this be done? I said, "Padh to lo yaar consultation mein, it's already in the master plan." So master plan, the only thing we've succeeded in doing is we know that the cities are under ventilator. Why? We know it. There is autonomous liberalization and movement of people taking place. Do you know what the population of Delhi was in 1947? Just guess. Area has not changed. I will tell you, it was 8 lakhs. Then Tavleen's previous generation and my previous generation came in from here, and the first census we had is what, 1951. It came to 22 lakhs, which means 11 lakh to jo wahan se aaye the people here. Today, what is the population of Delhi when the next census takes place? Nahi yaar, 2 crore. If it is, I like that. 2 crore se agar ek bhi kam hua, I think many of us who are in this business should give up. So 2 crore of people are living where 8 lakhs were living in 1947. Then we talk about cities being on ventilator. Please appreciate what we've done. 1,731 colonies regularized. Land pooling, massive spaces created. Jahan jhugi, wahi makan. That's the only way to go. Otherwise, you'll just collapse. But what happens is that a lot of people, because the urban space is changing so fast, I gave you a figure, 700 to 900 million square meters of additional space every year. People don't realize what's happening. Suddenly, I used to, as a very proud Indian citizen, when I used to come in from my foreign posting, I couldn't navigate my way in Delhi. Things change so quickly. So there is a lot happening, but it's happening in the right way. But you need citizen cooperation. A master plan or a city is what its citizens will be. So if you go into the New Delhi Municipal Corporation area, that's a smart city. It is one. But I would like the other parts which are now going to be dealt with by a single entity also to have this same kind of treatment meted out, and that's what we can do.
Thanks. I'll wrap up with a rapid fire. If you have just 5 minutes. So rapid fire is when...
What kind of rapid fire?
It's going to be, it's up to you. It's about how much fun you have with it.
Yeah, sure.
So as short an answer as possible, and the idea is to have some fun with it. So the one city in India you are most optimistic about, and why?
The one city in
India.
I'm most optimistic about, Delhi.
Mumbai, Hyderabad, Delhi, Bangalore, Chennai, Calcutta.
So I already told you Delhi.
Which is the next metro?
Which is the?
Which will be the next metro after these cities? Which will be the next metro in India?
Metro in the sense of?
We consider the 6 metros, 4 plus 2, now 2 new metros. Which will be the next biggest?
Name them again?
The 4 metros, Bombay, the old 4 were Bombay, Delhi, Calcutta, Madras. Now you added Hyderabad and Bangalore. So what will be the next one you'll add to that list?
After Hyderabad and Bangalore?
Yeah.
Look, Ahmedabad and Pune. Pune I would put also, but Pune, Pune has a pace of its own. Ahmedabad also has a pace of its own. Whether it will be these two or it will be some others, I really don't know. I want to duck that one because, I can tell you on the basis of the indices I know.
Yeah.
I can tell you on the basis of where a particular sector is doing well, etc. But in any listing, Ahmedabad and Pune would be considered. But whether there will be those two or the others, I don't know.
Okay. greenfield or brownfield, what's the better way to build a world-class, smart and safe city?
It's an unfair question. When we started the Smart Cities project, we said in our party manifesto for the 2014 elections, we said we'll build 100 new smart cities. As soon as we were in office, we realized you have to first deal with the existing ones. So when we took the bids, I think 90 are brownfield and 10 are greenfield. If I'm not mistaken, it has to be both.
Okay. Amravati or Lavasa, which is the bigger failure?
I'll turn the question around. I mean, maybe some of you may want to answer it. Amravati, Tavleen, which one would you like? I'm having fun. You said I was allowed to have fun.
You're allowed to have fun.
I'm having fun too. You should
You're
have
good.
kept it alive.
Yeah, so.
Okay, fair.
Okay.
Fair. I want Guya. Which do you think is the smartest city in India today?
Smartest city. Now listen, smart city, when you talk to a guy like me, he looks at the smart city project. 85 of those 100 have integrated command and control center, so they're all very smart. 15 of them I have to get done by 15th August. But tell me, have we had a ranking of the smart cities? Which was number one? Tell me, I'm going to answer the. No, that is cleanest. Shashi, do you remember that ranking? I don't also remember. They're all that 4 or 5 or 10 of them right on top, right on top.
Okay, fair. Now, for a city to be a smart one, how critical is it for it to be ruled by a BJP government state?
I think it's an absolute must, but I wouldn't put it past anybody else who wants to approximate our standards. They're most welcome.
On a scale of 1 to 10, what do you rate UN's effectiveness in preventing war? I've asked you this question a long way, asking you a short way now.
Don't make me say it, because, I have a lot of friends in New York and Brazil and Geneva. I mean, this one-liner will be taken that the former ambassador of India rated it at this figure. I want to duck this one.
We need something for Instagram also. That's why I'm trying to keep you short.
Tell them that the UN should be encouraged to, to step up. I see some diplomats here. You ask them.
The one bureaucrat turned politician you look up to?
I certainly have one that I would say you should not look up to, but that would be a very personal one at taking a pot shot, but I wouldn't.
No, answer. So who should I look up to then?
Who should not look up to, or look up to?
You were saying you have somebody in mind.
No, I wouldn't. I would say, there are so many success stories of people who were in diplomacy and then went on to do other things in all the political parties. They are not confined. I mean, I know in the party which was in office for the longest, you had some particularly successful people like Ambassador Narayanan was both an ambassador in Washington, he was a member of parliament, he was a minister of state for science and technology and so on. So there are a lot of examples, yeah.
There's no one bureaucrat turned politician you think is
Thank God there isn't one guy whom, otherwise you don't know what would happen to that guy.
Okay. The Congress or the Aam Aadmi Party, who do you think will emerge as bigger competition for your party?
Well, look, let me tell you one thing. Something that the Prime Minister says repeatedly, informally, that in the position in which we find ourselves, we need a good, credible opposition. All right? Now, if you look at the facts of the case as they are before us, you cut out all this wars going on TV, etc. The Congress party in the 2014 elections and 19 elections put together doesn't add up to 100 seats. Okay? If you look at they're standing in the Lok Sabha today and the Rajya Sabha, including what's happened in the last few elections, in the Rajya Sabha election, they certainly have to get their act together to be viewed as a credible opposition. Aam Aadmi Party, my views are slightly different. We are today at an inflection point in our polity. There are states which are running up very high public debt. I know the Punjab figure, I'm familiar with it. I was in one of the southern cities the other day, I looked at the figure there. State governments are equally capable of succumbing to this culture of freebies and so on. And at the end of the day, responsible government, responsible governance also means, yes, the state has to step in. Like during the pandemic, the Prime Minister provided, still providing 800 million people 3 meals in a day. That's important because there was a lockdown and there were other issues. But the utilities have to be available. You can't provide everything free. The Aam Aadmi Party will, वो क्या कहते हैं कि आटे दाल का भाव जो है पंजाब में पता लग जाएगा. And that's what they are telling me. They came in saying कि हम हर एक महिला को 1,000 रुपया महीने दे देंगे, हम ये कर देंगे, हम वो कर देंगे. Many of the things that they're going back on. Let's give it another 3 to 6 months. But just now, an honest answer from me as an individual, not as a minister, neither the Congress nor the Aam Aadmi Party inspire great confidence as being capable of becoming credible opposition party.
You think some other state party will emerge as a...
Well, I don't know. I mean, that's the beauty of democracy. You must give everyone a chance, no matter where he or she lives and whatever he or she comes up in terms of a regional dispensation.
Sure. How long do you see the war continuing for? You said you had an idea, you didn't get into that.
Well, I'm an optimist, so I hope that saner councils will prevail. And I can't put a figure. I can't. I'm not. It's not my job.
Weeks, months, a year?
No, I'm not. I think sooner than later.
Protectionism or global trade? Which approach do you see more, beneficial for the world to emerge from the mess that...
The question has an inherent contradiction. That global trade as we know it is not protectionist. I mean, you look at the history of the GATT, when developing countries became competitive exporters of textiles and clothing, they took the whole textiles and clothing sector out of the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade and put in managed trade in MFA. So that goes on. So what we will do is, we will say we are all for free trade, for multilaterally, free trade also be careful, multilaterally negotiated rules that govern the international trading system. We must be for that. And within that, if I have a concern on food security, as is reflected there, I must be. I mean, what's going to happen? Tomorrow I have a food crisis on my hand, and I can say I cannot pay MSP because, WTO doesn't allow it. Who's going to buy that? So I think it's a combination of both. Principle is high, multilaterally negotiated rules, but with safeguards in there for your domestic food security. I mean, I'm just giving you one example.
Yeah. Solar, wind, nuclear, hydro. Which of these do you see will emerge as the largest energy source after coal in India?
I think you're going to have several of them. Even the reluctance on nuclear, I mean, there was a prime minister who nearly staked his government on that nuclear deal, India, US, and then the IAEA safeguards agreement and the, nuclear suppliers group. But honest truth is that not a single dollars of contracting has taken place. Why is it not taken place? Because there were problems at the other end. But I think today, all these new renewable, alternate, all of them are going to come in a very big way. And I think nuclear also, as we go along.
Thank you so much for a wonderful conversation. You've been candid as always. You've not answered any of the rapid fires. You ducked them almost all of them.
No, look at it from my point of view. In the process of giving you a witty answer in rapid fire, if I had undone everything that I'd said in the 1 hour 43 minutes grilling that you've done otherwise, so I had to be a little more circumspect in the rapid fire.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anand.
For all
Thank
your
you.
Time. Thank you. Can I just ask the editor, Hardeep ji, एक second, the editor Unni Rajan Shankar to present Minister with a portrait saying thanks.
That looks like a very stern me.